Wisdom is not one thing, but several things. It's obviously intelligence, it's insight, it's experience, it's understanding, it's creativity, it's perspective. It's all these things and more, but it is not something you are born with.
What does it mean to live wisely in a loud, distracted, and often reactive world?
To me, what wisdom is like knowing what's what. You got to know what is and isn't, what matters, what doesn't matter. The reason I think wisdom matters is that all the other virtues are in some ways born from it or informed by it.
Welcome back, or welcome to the Finding Mastery podcast, where we dive into the minds of the world's greatest thinkers and doers. I am your host, Dr. Michael Gervais, by trade and training a high-performance psychologist. The idea behind these conversations is simple. It's to sit with the extraordinaries and to learn, to really learn how they work from the inside out. Today's conversation is with Ryan Holiday, best-selling author and one of the most thoughtful modern interpreters of Stoic philosophy. Ryan doesn't treat wisdom as an abstract idea or a badge that you earn. He treats it as a daily practice.
Life is constantly teaching you, and you are constantly being exposed to all sorts of information and ideas, and in some cases, like real truths about the human experience. And what are we doing with the information? Are we actually translating that into some kind of practical understanding and wisdom? That, to me, is what it's all about.
Ryan breaks down the 4 dimensions of wisdom and why parenting may be the hardest job you'll ever do without a manual.
The idea that you're just like, well, this worked for my parents, and I'm not totally screwed up. I hate that sort of curiosity or certainty of like, well, it didn't screw me up, is like, it's a screwed up person about to screw up another person.
As you listen, consider what might change if you treated wisdom not as something that you have, but something that you practice again and again. With that, let's jump into this week's conversation with Ryan Holiday. I love the chance to be able to sit down with you. And for those that haven't listened to the multiple conversations we've had before, for me, this is like, I'm on a learning curve with you, and I really appreciate the path that you've traveled ahead to bring back some of the sweetest berries and sometimes the sourest berries that you can find to say, hey, listen, this is what I've been paying attention to. So thank you again for doing the hard work and then come and celebrate here with us.
Well, I'm excited. I came prepared to be mentally exhausted, which is what I remember the first time I came down here and saw you. I was like, did I just do like a 2.5-hour therapy session? Like, was that an interview, or did I just get examined? Yeah, that's what I remember.
So funny. What was that like? I remember we were going. Like that was I think maybe our first conversation.
It was.
Yeah.
I think I was still just working out a lot of stuff. You were probably just asking me totally interview questions, and I was like there's a famous Mitch Hedberg joke where he talks about he went to a radio interview and they said, so who are you? And then he didn't know if it meant that he came to the wrong studio or if it was an existential question. And it's like, you never know.
You know, some of the hardest questions I get are, so tell me what you do. I'm like, wow.
Yeah.
I can give you like the 2-liner, or like, do you really want to know? Because this could unravel quickly.
Or do they just they haven't done one smidge of research and they just want you to go like, I'm a writer, you know?
And they're like, oh yeah, that's right. Okay, right.
Yeah. Like, are they just trying to briefly introduce the audience, or they want to go real deep? That's always the question.
So you've got a great style about you, is that you're super matter of fact. And I imagine you might answer like, okay, are we going the short version, or have you done your homework?
I think it would just depend on how like tired I was, or how ready I was to do the thing. You know, like sometimes, and I think you see this in like people who do a lot of, you're like, you see this in athletes. They have the thing they know they can say to wrap this thing up and not have to, you know, it's like, we went out there, we played our best, and, praise God. And, next question.
Go team.
Yeah, exactly. There's just and actually when I've talked to athletes, especially when I've worked on books with them, actually getting them past that is like a lot of work, because there's this kind of like, it's almost like they've gotten used to not having to go further than the clichés.
That's
but
right.
There's clearly like usually most of them are kind of like philosophers of what they do, and they've had to think very deeply about it, especially if they've been successful at it for a long time. But they're used to just like, we did our best.
Yeah, there's different venues for that, because when you open up, somebody who's committed to mastery, right? And you open that up, they've got lots of ways of thinking about it. And they're really, my experience, broad strokes are always dangerous, but they're really good by saying, I don't know. Like I'm confused by this and I'm confused by that, but this definitely works.
Yeah.
Like there's an openness to learning that is noted. But on the marketing mind stuff is as soon as the microphone's there, they're taught, say something nice about your competitor, say something nice about your teammates, and take the blame.
Yeah.
If it didn't go well,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah.
Never take the glory or the light.
Yes.
Kind of point at others to be able to deflect and praise.
Yeah, and that works for a soundbite, but there's not actually anything there, and it's not really what's going on. And then they're like doing a book, or they're trying, and you're like, this isn't that can carry you for 20 seconds, but not an hour conversation or 300 pages. There has to be like a real thing there. And then sometimes I think you realize, and this is something it's like mostly what I do is think about stuff and articulate. That's where I perform. That's my thing that I've sought mastery in. And you go, oh, like you are not verbally expressing this stuff verbally is not what lights you up. It's you have a physical gift and a genius, and you could, and just like what you're not doing is spending a lot of time thinking about how to explain it.
You're talking about the athlete in that case.
Yeah,
but
just
for
doing
you,
it.
in your case, you spend a lot of time on thinking and expressing ideas.
That's literally what I do.
That's your job.
Yeah.
So when how athletes get ready for performance, and most, not all, are pretty surgical on a process to be able to switch on their very best, to give themselves the best chance. It's always a work in progress. But how do you ready yourself for a conversation like this?
Oh, for a conversation? Like if I'm going to do a talk or I'm going to sit down, I usually...
No, for like a podcast.
Yeah, I'm just saying, like if I'm going to do I'll usually work out first. Like today I was doing a couple, so I was like, I got to get up early, even though it was raining, it was dark. I was like, if I don't run, then I won't be regulated through what will be a fundamentally dysregulating day. So it's usually some kind of physical thing. And then I like to make some kind of contribution to my work. So like I didn't have that much time this morning. So it was like, there was this thing I had to edit. So I sat down and I edited like a piece that I was working on. So I was like, okay, I checked off these like 2 boxes, and then I can come to whatever I have to do, both from a place of calm, but also like not like there's this thing I have to do later.
Yeah. Right. Yeah.
So that's mostly kind of how I think about it.
I used to not mind that feeling. I felt like it would create the right type of internal tension for me to do good work later. But then as I've gotten a bit older, I want to start winding down.
Yeah.
And so I would way rather, let's just say, work out in the morning or do deep thinking in the morning, as opposed to kind of put it off towards the end of the day. Because I'm competing full time to get my sleep right.
Yeah.
Yeah.
There's a Toni Morrison thing where she was saying, the most important thing that that writers or creatives need to know is like, when are you at your best? And like, when do you do your best work? And then you have to sort of design your day around it. There's the famous story is that she was raising 2 young kids as a single mother, and she was an editor at Random House during the day. So she was like, I have to do all my writing before I hear the word mom. And so she would get up early and do it. And she said there was something about the sun rising and whatever. But like what I have found out as I get older is that I just do shit work after about noon. So like anything generative, like I'm dead after about noon. And so I have to front load the day with the writing stuff then.
Yeah.
So it's like, if I'm like, hey, well, I'll do all these things and then I'll get to that later, I might as well just not do it.
So it's a segue. Let's talk about Wisdom Takes Work.
Sure.
And the simple question is, why wisdom? Why go after wisdom? Which I think is a noble choice.
Well, I was doing a series on the cardinal virtues. So I did courage, discipline, justice, wisdom. So I didn't choose the virtues. I chose to write about the virtues, but I didn't choose what they were. Obviously, these are the fundamental principles of Stoic philosophy. So in some sense, I chose wisdom because it was part of this larger swing that I was taking. I'd never done any interrelated projects before, and I was creatively interested just in the idea of like, how do you do in the way that it's like, hey, I wrote a movie and now I'm going to write a multi-season television show. Like, what does that look like as a challenge? So I was interested in that. And then, there was some discretion about, of course, what order they go in. And I felt like courage made sense to be first and wisdom made sense to be last, in that it struck me as the most difficult and the one that is kind of the penultimate of the virtues. So there was that. And then, of course, I obviously have some discretion as to what wisdom is. Like the Stoics tell us that's what they are. And there's not like, one particularly clear passage from any of them where they go, and then let me define terms. So we can only kind of deduce what it means. So obviously that's where sort of creatively and philosophically my challenge was. It's like, what is courage? What is discipline, or temperance as it was rendered? And it's interesting, for instance, like many of the ancients and then their subsequent translators would call it prudence. That was the word they would use for wisdom. Okay, so right there we're saying that wisdom is not one thing but several things, right? And I think that's kind of where I came down is, it's obviously intelligence, it's obviously insight, it's experience, it's understanding, it's creativity, it's perspective, it's prudence, it's all these things and more, right? There is something fundamentally ineffable about wisdom. And I would say ineffable as well as elusive. Like, if you're like, here's my 3-sentence definition of wisdom, it's probably not only is it wrong, but it is illustrative of your lack of grasp of wisdom to think that it could be so easily contained. So I think where I ended up coming down is on this idea that wisdom is many things.
Super helpful, by the way.
Yeah. It's many things, but it is not something you are born with.
Yeah.
It is something you acquire, and yet there's an unlimited amount of it to acquire. And so I think the reason I came down with the idea of like it takes work is that wisdom is really a method as opposed to a thing that you possess. It's like all the virtues, it's more of a verb than a noun. So in the same way, like, it's something you're doing as opposed to something you have. It's not a state that you are in. It is a process that you are following. And, obviously this goes back to Socrates, right? Why is Socrates considered wise? It's not because of what he knows. The oracle at Delphi is implying that he knows that he's not the wisest person and therefore possesses some modicum of wisdom. And so it's actually in the humility or in the mindset that one orients themselves towards being able to get wiser as opposed to get wise.
Yeah. There's all well said. And it was really refreshing when I opened up the first chapter in your book, and it was almost the first paragraph. And you're like, yeah, probably not going to define this thing in a satisfying way, but I will tell you what it's not.
Yes.
Which is cool. That's a good counterbalance. And I was refreshed that you didn't come up with refreshed, and at the same time, like I was hoping for.
Sure, me too.
Like some sort of 3-sentence pithy, all encompassing. That being said, there's 2 variables that I'm really interested in the wisdom process. I do think that people obtain wisdom. I do agree that there's a path towards the deep understanding, if you will, is another kind of phrase.
Yes.
But I do think like at some point, it's for me, I'd love for you to bounce off this. It's more than just the path to acquire or to understand deeply, because I know wise people.
Yeah.
Yeah. And when I'm around those people, I'm like, oh, it's different.
But they almost certainly do not consider themselves to be wise people.
No master calls themselves a master.
Right.
And as soon as they would, the others that are true, like masters of craft or self, they would say, oh, you just exited out of the,
Yes,
the
yes.
inner sanctum.
Because what they are committed to is a mindset or an approach
That's right.
that makes them conducive to expressing or articulating some, wise insight or understanding or whatever in the moment.
Yeah.
But it's not only not an in state for them, they are themselves not in any kind of in state, right?
It's not an end state. Yeah.
Yeah. There's a physicist, John Wheeler, he said, as our island of knowledge grows, so does the shoreline of ignorance. And so what happens is the more you learn, you're bumping into all these things that not only did you not know, but you didn't even know were a part of it. Like, there's the famous John McPhee book about levels of the game. You're at a level, and then you're not even aware that there's another level until you bump up against, like you play someone who's at that level, or you glimpse it for a second, and then you go, oh, not only did I not know how to do that, I did not know that was a thing you could do.
I just want to say thank you for being part of this podcast. We put a lot of love and care into each conversation, and it would mean a lot to us if you could do two things. If you could hit the subscribe button below on the Finding Mastery YouTube channel and give the video a like. It's a free, no-cost way to support the podcast, and it helps us continue bringing these conversations with some of the world's best thinkers and doers to you. Again, just like and hit the subscribe button below. Thank you so much for being part of this community. Let's keep growing. Let's keep exploring together. I asked, he was a Russian world-class wrestler, and they've got quite a system that he came through at least.
Yeah.
And it looked like physical poetry when he would move. And I asked him, I said, like, what is it like for you?
Yeah.
And he said, well, I don't know how to explain it, but it's like I understand the alphabet and I can put it to use. I think he's talking about his body and his technical craft, and I can put it to use in a lot of different ways. And I said, how did I put it? It was something about getting better or growing. And he says, oh, that's easy. Like I see a mountain and I climb it, and I get to the top of that mountain. I see another mountain. So I climb down, realizing that I didn't know very much. And then I climb back up that next one. And when I get to the higher one, I realize there's another one.
Yes.
And so he's just pointing to, like, to your point, the process. Now, I would not call him a wise person.
Sure.
He was a master of craft, not a master of self.
Well, that's something I did want to talk about in the book, because there are people who are very smart who are also quite stupid.
Yeah.
And part one of the book is more or less about sort of the sort of basic, like, how do you become a student of life, of a craft, of a thing, the sort of methodology for acquiring wisdom. And then the second part of the book is really about how you avoid most of the pitfalls that can destroy you. And in many ways, what happens in this sort of second phase is much of what you picked up in the first phase is now being used against you. So, like, your sense of what you know is now really dangerous because you think you know something. And so there are these, like, sort of traps that people fall into, and it's sort of a story as old as time. But I'm interested in, like, wisdom is, on the one hand, the acquisition of knowledge and insight and understanding and experiences. And it's also the removal of flaws and biases and traps and dead ends that, like, historically have destroyed or rendered foolish many brilliant people. Like a big, obviously, ego is a huge one, but another one is just like sheer overwork, right? So you kind of just snap under the pressure and stress that you put yourself under, or you're incredibly wise and or smart and understanding and experience and whatever, but you have these kind of lingering issues from your childhood, and so now you're a really smart scientist who's emotionally 16, and you're not subjected to the temptations that a 16-year-old is being subjected to, but you're asked to weigh in on, questions of global significance. Or, like, I think scientists are fascinating because, like, obviously they're way smarter than I am, and you see that, like, you just don't know how their brain can do what they do. And then watching, like, the petty squabbles and fights that they get into, and their desire for credit and attention, or the number of really brilliant scientists who fell for like scams and conspiracy theories and nonsense because, what part of them not only was like traumatized or struggled early on, but like is now being subjected to pressures and environments that require a different kind of intelligence and maybe a savvy to navigate the political situation inside a university, or the ability to articulate or, I don't know, operate inside a family unit. Like all these other skills are now being required. And if you can't cut that, what you get is resentment and bitterness and frustration, all sort of really powerful forces that can.
You bring up all of the kind of modern trappings in the second part. But
Yeah.
When you think about the Stoics, let's go back for one moment before we go too far forward. When you think about why the Stoics chose wisdom, it always confused me.
Really?
Yeah, because that it would be a virtue. And I differ a little bit in kind of the, I don't know, maybe the premise, which is
of the four virtues, you mean, or of wisdom itself?
No, just wisdom. That because I think that let's take the other four virtues, is that they're always readily available, even at a young age. Courage is available.
Sure.
And wisdom is not readily available. And there's time under tension required. Usually it happens for people that are older. Not necessarily. You can shorten the curve, but it's not. At some point, it becomes available in a small way. And I think we could have fun in saying, wait, maybe the kids are the wisest. It's always, but I don't think that they wouldn't kind of check the boxes in a way that would be satisfying. How would you take that position?
Well, maybe what we're squabbling over here is like, are we saying that wisdom is what a 90-year-old who's seen a lot of things and done a lot of things, and that sort of like lowercase sense of being philosophical, like the big picture, they know what really matters. Like, if that's what we're talking about, wisdom, then sure, you don't have that when you're young. But I think what we're talking about, if like, what does wisdom mean? Or philosophy means like a love of wisdom. So it doesn't necessarily mean the possession of wisdom, but it means a love or an attraction or interest in exploring it. So to me, what wisdom is, my sort of, I said I didn't give a definition, but I actually gave a very short definition of the book, which is like knowing what's what.
Yeah, it's a fun way.
You got to know what is and isn't, what matters, what doesn't matter. Now, obviously, your understanding of this is going to evolve over time as you learn and study and experience and experiment and all of that. At the same time, the reason I think wisdom matters as this virtue, and why I said it's the penultimate virtue, is that all the other virtues are in some ways born from it or informed by it. Yeah. So like, yes, courage is readily available, of course. Discipline, definitely. Temperance, readily available. But there's that expression like sometimes discretion is the better part of valor. So like, yes, the courage of the young who's willing to take any risk, bear any burden, do anything, that is a form of courage. But as you get older and you experience more, you understand things on a deeper and a bigger level. And it's not that should moderate your courage, but it should direct and shape and inform it. I think a great example of this is justice. Is justice just knowing what is right and knowing what should be done? Maybe. But I think wisdom and where the virtues all inform each other is like, okay, but what can you do about it? Where can you bring it in the world? And there is this kind of idealistic, youthful sense of justice that's very black and white. And then there is the justice and the sense of ethics that it's not that it's situational and that it's always willing to compromise, but it does understand that we are imperfect people in an imperfect world. Like one of my favorite lines, it's an illustrative one in Marcus Aurelius' Meditations, when you go, this guy's the emperor of Rome. He writes like, remember that you don't live in Plato's Republic. And so, philosophically, what you know or what you would like to be true is very different than somebody hands you the keys to an empire slowly, painstakingly, brutally, and violently assembled over centuries. If you think that you can change it like that and magically make it what you want to be, what you're ignoring, what you're your sense of right and wrong could be totally dialed in. But what you're lacking is the wisdom to understand why it is the way that it is, which is to say, what were the compromises and accommodations and painful acceptances that shaped and informed the thing. And so often, like, what you see, like some of the most dangerous movements in all of history have been like youthful, revolutionary, radical groups that think they can, that humanity, it just needs some more information and some nudging, and then it will become. So do you see what I mean? Like, what wisdom, I think, is something that evolves over time, but it has to inform and shape the other virtues, because otherwise they are something impractical, entitled, even like petulant and dangerous.
Yeah, I think that, like, at one level I can fully clump them together and be like, yeah, those are great.
Yeah.
Those virtues are wonderful. I understand why those would be, at the high table. I just think fundamentally that one's just a little bit different than the others.
Yeah.
And so however, when I think through them, courage, justice, discipline, that it's not like you add those up and you get to wisdom. So it doesn't work that way.
No.
And it doesn't mean that if you are somebody who's on the path to acquire or understand or inhabit the complex made simple, the universal kind of insights about how things work, that all of a sudden you're going to have the opposite. You're going to have courage. I think you got to practice courage. You got to build it. So they don't quite square, but I like them. I'm not in any way disagreeing, but I just point out, like, I've always had a little bit of a hanging chad. Like, that one's different.
That's a great, yes. What's interesting about it is Zeno, the founder of Stoicism 2,500 years ago, who first lays down the virtues. Aristotle had a few more. It's not, he picks
seven,
these four.
Right? Did Aristotle have 7?
Yeah, and then I think Ben Franklin had 12. Like, people are always, but he picks out 4. And he says they are distinct yet inseparable from each other, which is kind of the perfect way of expressing it. It's not like, as you said, the first 3 add up to the 4th. And in fact, you can put them in any order, but you really can't remove one without fundamentally altering the others. And you see how one has to inform and shape the others. I do think they're related in a couple ways. As I said, they're all born from wisdom, in that wisdom has to explain when and how to apply them. At the same time, you subtract justice from any of them, and you're dealing with some real problems. I'd also say, it takes courage to bring any of the 4 into reality, right? Like the decision to sit down and pursue wisdom in a superficial, even foolish world takes courage, or to decide to be yourself and do what you think is valuable, takes courage. So they all shape and inform each other. Where would they be without the willpower or the discipline to execute on them?
It's a nice way to think about it. Yeah. Which is, you're nodding back to 2,500 years ago, the first insight around it. And I'm not sure if you said it, if you meant to say it, but I want to just highlight it. Were you talking about yourself when you said to sit down and write about courage in a foolish world?
No, I meant to sit down and be interested in wisdom in a foolish world.
But are you talking about yourself there, or are you talking about one of the Stoics?
Well, I think I say this in the afterword, that like this didn't exactly feel like I'm hardly ranking it in the the sort of pantheon of courageous acts, but like the decision to sit down and write a book about wisdom, there is something scary about that. It was scary to me, which is, I guess, I could say that with certainty. I'm not asking for anyone else to pat me on the back. I'm just saying, like, I was intimidated by the project and I did it anyway.
Why is that? Why is that?
Well, I was intimidated the first time I wrote about Stoicism at all. I'm a college dropout who's largely self-taught. Like, I don't have the security or the confidence of like, oh, I have a degree in this. Like, you should listen to me, right? So there is, anytime you're doing something that's outside your comfort zone, that's what we're talking about when we talk about courage. But I just mean like the idea of like, hey, I'm gonna go learn about something. I'm going to take seriously that there is such a thing as wisdom, and I want to get as much of it as I can. I feel like that is a courageous act in a world where most people operate on the surface and don't ask a lot of questions. So I think there is something courageous for anyone who's like, I'm going to go back to school, or I'm going to pick up a book, or I'm going to figure out why things are the way that they are.
Yeah, yours, the difference between school and picking up a book and yours is that yours is wildly popular, like, scrutinized and observed. And, even so much that you had a talk that was controversial at an academy.
That did happen, yes.
Yes, I do want to come back to that. Okay, let's stay on wisdom one more turn here, which is you did a deep scrub of one of the most important attributes for me, for a person to be able to walk the walk and talk the walk, is that they need to really understand what's what, to use your language, and then have the courage to be able to act accordingly. So I love that you went after it. What do you hope that we understand from the most simple of hopes and desires? Like, what do you hope we'll understand from reading it?
What I felt like my contribution was the idea that wisdom isn't, okay, so we go like, hey, wisdom is a thing that takes a long time, and mostly older people have it. So is it just a function of sticking at this life thing? I mean, absolutely not, because I've met a lot of stupid old people too.
That's right, yeah.
And so like, I dislike this idea that wisdom is a natural byproduct of being a sentient human being. It's certainly not.
Somebody had introduced to me, it was in college, and I just loved it. There's 3 paths. I already know that they're reductionist, but it was a fun statement. There's 3 paths. The path to be an old fool, a bitter old fool, or a wise person.
Yeah.
And I heard that early, and I was like, wait, what's an old fool? They just constantly chased all the external pleasures of life.
Yeah.
Bitter old fool, they chased them but didn't get them. And then the wise person is somebody that worked from the inside out, that really wanted to understand how things, people, experiences, like what's sitting underneath of it, make it universally available, and take the complexity and make it simple. And I was like, oh, that's the path of like joy and happiness,
totally,
purpose and meaning. That's it. And so that's why I was really pleased that you added to the body of work there.
Well, I think people go, oh, you don't, like, books are inferior or insufficient. You got to learn by experience, right? And it's true, experience can teach a lot, but it's not a given that experience teaches. I mean, people are having experiences all the time, every day of their life, and wisdom is exceedingly rare. So it is certainly, experience can teach. It is necessary but not sufficient. And so there's this great line, Churchill often had the way of just getting to the essence of things. He was talking about Neville Chamberlain, who, like, he didn't know just as this one guy who made this one bad decision at Munich, but like his perpetual political foe. And I think he said of Chamberlain, this was a man who occasionally stumbled over the truth. And when he did, he picked himself up and dusted himself off and carried on as if nothing had happened. And so I would say that describes a lot of people. Like life is constantly teaching you, and you are constantly being exposed to all sorts of information and ideas, and in some cases, like real truths about the human experience. And then most people don't even observe that anything is happening.
Are we becoming less wise?
I don't look back at history and go, humanity really figured it out back then either, right? Like in some cases, I think collectively we're getting wiser than we have been before. And then in other cases, we're getting much stupider. I do think there were certainly wiser people of a type that perhaps we don't see so much anymore. But I'm not that interested in whether, like, the trend lines of wisdom. I'm more interested in, like, individually, like in our own journeys, are you and I getting wiser, and what are we doing with the information, whether it's from a book or a lecture or hard-won experience? Are we actually translating that into some kind of practical understanding and wisdom? That to me is what it's all about. And I think anyone who's actually done the work, you realize, oh, you read about stuff or somebody tells you something, and then you have experiences, and those experiences are shaped by what you bring to them. And then what you bring to them is also shaped by what you take out of the intersection. And so the subtitle of the book is Learn, Apply, Repeat. It's this kind of infinite loop of you try, you hear about something, you try a thing, and then you come away with a combination of those two things that is unique and special, and then you go learn more. And that's when we're talking, what is the method? That's the method.
Yeah, I saw the subtitle and I understood, and you also point to the method that I'm more aligned with, which is it's a path of deep concentration.
Yeah.
So when you deeply concentrate, deep focus, if you will, on a thing, you end up understanding that thing.
Yes.
I don't think there's another way other than deep concentration. You might hear somebody say something like, I don't know, fill in the blanks, whatever it might be, but it's not yours, it's theirs.
Yes.
So you have to really grok and deep focus and concentration. And then you start to understand something.
Mm-hmm.
And then you get like this insight, like, so concentration to insight. And then when you cobble a handful of insights together, like, oh, wait, that's how this works. And that's how that over there worked. Wait a minute.
And we have connections between the insights.
Oh, wait, yeah. So that's where you reveal wisdom.
Mm-hmm.
So,
and then also, then you create a theory or a plan, and you try to do something with that. And then some of it works and some of it doesn't work. And then there is that process of reflection again, the debrief.
That's the repeat you said.
Well, no, I think it's learn, apply, reflect, repeat.
Reflect,
right? Is probably how I would say that the important thing that people miss, right? It's not just like, hey, I read a lot, so I know a lot, or I do a lot, so I know a lot. It's a combination of those two things. But then it's this process of, well, what do I know? What am I feeling? How am I discussing and analyzing and reaching conclusions out of it? Like you think about, right? Coach has a plan, trains the players and everything. They practice it, then they do it in the game, and then what do they do on Monday? Or Tuesday is they sit down and they break down the film of what happened, and in some cases, it's like, look, you failed because you didn't execute the plan. And in other cases, it's like, hey, the plan was insufficient. Here's the change we're making. But wisdom is that process. That is the cycle that you're repeating. And so who you were at the beginning of the season should be inferior to who you are at the end of the season. And who you are at the beginning of your career versus who you are at the end of your career should be transformatively different. And you're repeating miniature and macro versions of that in all aspects of your life all the time.
Creatine is part of my foundational stack for strength, for recovery, and most importantly, brain performance. The problem, a lot of chewables that are on the market, they're just candy with a label. Momentous did it the right way. After years of testing, literally years, they built the first chewable creatine that meets the Momentous standard. 1 gram of Pure Creatine, NSF certified for sport. Made from ingredients that I trust. No artificial flavors, no fillers, just proven performance that you can chew on the go. No mixing, no mess. Momentous Creatine chews. Just grab, chew, and go. I have a first principle that life is pretty hard.
Sure.
Yeah. It's thorny. There's lots of trapdoors. It's not designed for our happiness, our joy.
Mm-hmm.
And
it's not even designed for our survival.
Yeah, no, right. Our brain is optimized for it because, it's dangerous out there. And I think most people have a pretty lonely experience. And I'm not talking about the loneliness of despair and the loneliness of depression. I'm not talking about that. But there's a uniqueness to your experience and my experience that is nearly impossible for me to express my fullness of my experience in life.
Yeah.
So it's contained or trapped inside of me.
Sure.
And if I don't really examine that and have a way to express it externally, it is hard to connect with other people. Okay. And I'm not talking about depression or despair, just to be clear. So with that kind of assumption, if you will, how do you think about life in general when it comes to the path of wisdom, the dearth of wisdom, the state that we're in, based on what you've studied from the Stoics and kind of the modern contemporary understandings that you're.
Well, I would agree. Life is extremely hard, and it's harder for some than others, depending on where and when and how and what sort of hand you got dealt. But wisdom isn't just this thing that you acquire from your own lived experience. That would mean we're figuring everything out for the first time every time.
What's it called? 52 dates?
Yeah.
Right.
Seneca said, the whole point of philosophy is that it allows you to annex into your life all of the wisdom and ideas of the past. And so it seems silly that obviously you come out of the womb knowing nothing and having access to nothing. You're just like this. You might as well be the first person ever born as far as you understand it. But then very clearly and quickly you realize, oh, there's other people. They went through the same thing. They know a bit more than me because they're further along the path. And then you realize, oh, there's some people who've really got this life thing figured out. I want to learn from them. Maybe that's your parents. Maybe it's not. And then you go, oh, but also every person who has ever lived, well, what did they learn? And what did collectively as society, as a species, have we figured out? And you realize that's where the transference of wisdom comes in. And Stoicism is founded around this very idea. Zeno, the founder, he is this merchant, and he's traveling around the Mediterranean, and he stops at the Temple of Apollo in Delphi, which I was just at. And you come in from the sea, and you wind your way up to the top of this very tall mountain, and you wash your hands at the sacred spring, and you make your way up the sacred way, and through these shining temples that every Greek city-state had put up in honor of a victory or the gods. You make your way to the Temple of Apollo, and you would light this incense, and then the oracle would come out, probably high off these vapors that came from the ground, and give you this kind of mysterious enigma or riddle that you were supposed to sort of use to answer your question. And the oracle of Delphi tells him that wisdom comes when you begin to have conversations with the dead. And he doesn't know what this means. And so he takes it back with him. And it's not until he washes up penniless in Athens in the Agora, which again, you can walk through to this day. And he hears a bookseller reading, out loud, a scroll of a story from Socrates. And it's in this moment that he realizes that is talking with the dead, that books are a way to talk with the dead. And indeed, we sometimes call the great texts of the ancient world like the great conversation, because you're talking to Plato and Socrates and Aristotle and Zeno and Marcus Aurelius and Seneca and Homer and all the great thinkers of the past. That it's a conversation. But mostly what it is it's a transference of wisdom. Like these stories were supposed to be entertaining, yes, and provocative sometimes, but mostly they were supposed to be like, here's what we figured out. We learned this or that. What about this? Here's a question. And that's what wisdom is. It is starting from everything up until now and then adding to it. And it's this kind of perpetual journey that we're on.
It's cool. It's the ultimate passing the baton.
Yes. And the idea is that you should leave it a little bit better than you found it. What are you adding to the store of knowledge?
In our modern world, to me, my account is that wisdom is at an all-time, in my life, low. It feels like...
Probably.
There's a bias here. I've only lived half a decade.
Sure.
I have not lived the, 250,000, 300,000 years of whatever. So that being said, why do I say that? Is the bias is that there was a much simpler time before cell phones. And there was a bit of I thought about this when I was reading your book about like, what are you yearning for? Because when I read the ancients or anyone before me that has that I think will or has held up for the ages, there is just this feeling and there's this kind of thing that washes over me. Like, God, it's so wonderful to really learn what they learned and to be a student of that, to try to understand the context of what they're dispelling their information from. And it pulls me back to a much simpler time, which was like before the cell phone for me was this demarcation. And I know that, we're going to, of course, there's a question of AI in here somewhere, but what is it that you're yearning for? Because that's what happens to me when I go back and read, the ancients.
Well, I mean, look, you can tend to think of, the time of Socrates as this golden age where people walked around in togas and, just talked about ideas. But also, Socrates lives through a great power conflict, like akin to America being in a 40-year war with China. And he fights in the war. His city loses the war, and then Athens is ruled not by a tyrant, but for a time known as the 30 tyrants. And then he's put to death by his fellow countrymen. So for like asking too many questions, basically, right? So like humans have always been humans and always done things like this. And it is kind of not refreshing because it's a little sad, but like some of the oldest bits of culture we have, like there's this stone from like 4,000 years ago or something, and it's like complaining about kids these days. Like every generation is worried about the previous generation and worried about the current state of things. I mean, is there something kind of anti-wisdom about social media and our phones? Yes, I think so. It's not the most conducive to consideration and empathy and patience and big picture and collaborate. It's bad. I would certainly stipulate that. Is there something I'm yearning for going back towards? No. And I to answer your question, and I think it brings it together, there's a great line from Blaise Pascal. He says, all of humanity's problems stem from our inability to sit quietly in a room alone. And so I would say I would like to do that, Am I really able to do that? No, not even close. Is that partly because of my phone? Sure. But is that because that was a problem 500 years ago also? And it's fundamentally a human thing. And I think it's fundamentally a youthful thing that you tend to find as like one of the things I admire about the older people that I know is their ability to just sit there. Mm-hmm. They're just operating at a slower pace. And it's not because they're physically not capable of a faster pace so much or mentally not. They just realize how silly some of the rushing is.
One of the wisdom teachers that I'm fond of, I asked her what she's working on, and she said, returning to innocence.
Ooh.
Yeah. And I said, what do you mean? And she says, well, I just want to return to that innocent part of me that I've lost.
I love that because and I talked about this in the Justice books, one of my least favorite expressions is this one that is, if you're not liberal when you're young, you have no heart. And if you're not conservative when you're older, you have no brain. Again, this is lowercase l and lowercase c, not exactly one party or another, but I hate the implication that you're supposed to become more cynical and hard-hearted as you get older.
Right, yeah.
That you're supposed to be less interested in other people and trying to fix things. What I really admire, and I can think of a few people specifically, but I really, really admire the old people that I know that are still very social justice oriented and very empathetic and kind. And they're not worried about protecting their thing. They're like, I'm already good. I'm worried about young people. Not like the young people suck, but like they're worried about the sake of younger people.
Speaking of younger people, parenting is, I know that you're one and I'm one and so many of our community are. It's a tough one.
It's the hardest thing you've ever done, and you've never done it before. And you're only going to do it a few times.
A few times, right.
Yeah.
I have one son, and I think a lot like, if I had a second go, I would be better, But anyways, what would you point parents to understand a little bit better based on your research on wisdom?
Well, first off, that it's something you should try to learn about and get better at. Like, the idea that I do understand at some level this is like a biological thing and your instincts are pretty good. But the idea that you're just like, well, this worked for my parents and I'm not totally screwed up. I hate that sort of uncuriosity or certainty of like, well, it didn't screw me up, is like, that's a screwed up person about to screw up another person, you know?
That's right.
So like having a curiosity and an openness and in fact feel a compulsion to try to break various cycles, to do it differently, to do it better. That isn't to say you turn it into a second job that you're trying to win at, because it's not something you win at, but it is, how are you treating this as similarly to how you would treat anything that you are trying, which is like you're trying to do it well because the stakes are high.
Yeah, that's right.
And that there is a lot of, this is the thing we've been doing the longest, and we have a lot of lessons about what works and a lot of lessons about what really profoundly doesn't work and how to think about that. Like, one of the reasons I wrote The Daily Dad is like, I thought it's weird that you're supposed to, like, when your spouse or you get pregnant and they're like, read these books. And then they're like you're supposed to do like 9 months of reading, and then you're just like, good.
Right.
You know?
Yeah, right.
And I really hated that even when I was reading those books, it's like telling me about how I'm supposed to do something 15 years from now, like I'm going to remember any of it.
Yeah, right.
In fact, it has to be this kind of ongoing conversation in the way that you might belong to a professional group or an association, or you might attend a conference. Like, how many parents would ever go to a conference about parenting, or would even, are actively looking for and trying to acquire wisdom to make them better at this thing that they're doing?
Not many.
Yeah, and that's really sad.
It is sad. Yeah, but we go to professional conferences
Sure.
all the time. Yeah.
Yeah, and yet you go, but I do it all for my family, or like they're my number one priority. And it's like, is that what your calendar says? Is that what, if I could look at like a breakdown of your thoughts, is that where most of your thinking was? Or is most of your thinking at like, how do I make more money? How do I get this person to like me? Or I even think about, this is something I struggle with, even with Stoicism. It's like, look, I'm pretty good at not being rude to people in line. I'm pretty patient with the people that work for me. I try to just be a good person in the world. And then I get home and I'm like, I'm out. How many of us are saving and actively working? Like, how many of us are our best self at home or our best behaved self at home, right? Because you tend to give the leftovers to your family, and then you pat yourself on the back and go, I do it all for them. They're my number one thing. That's my most important job.
Yeah, as you say it, I see myself in that. Like, it's the ultimate kind of trickery.
Yeah.
Like to feel good about myself as I'm leaving home to go travel again.
Yeah.
And I say, it's the strike while the iron's hot is something you'll hear me say, which is, I believe that. Like, that's
of course.
Yeah. Why not? Family's number one, but I'm away so much. Like,
Totally.
And, I do think it requires an excellent partner in somebody who knows how to take care of the things that you're not able to take care of.
Yes.
But it does need to go both ways. I need to take care of the things that my wife can't take care of,
Sure.
or doesn't want to, and vice versa. And then I feel like you got a little bit of a team, call it a family, but it's,
of course.
What are some basic practices that you think would be important?
Obviously, sort of always be learning. And then how are you, in the same way that if you were on a football team or you just had a sales meeting, you would do your best, you'd try to do the thing, and then afterwards you'd be like, all right, well, why did that go horribly? Or like, why did that go well?
Yeah.
And I think those moments before bed when you're both exhausted and like, are you watching TV or are you going, so why was that so rough? Or what did you need? Or what the conversations of like, how are we getting better at this? And then how are you getting feedback from like the person that really matters, which is them, the kid?
Yeah,
And usually your kid's not giving you progress reports, but they are saying things, from time to time that really tell you.
Well, you had a great insight.
lot.
Your kids are not going to do what you tell them. I'm paraphrasing. They're not going to do what you say, but they're watching you
Sure.
and behaving accordingly.
Yeah, or like, look, this is a way it's real practice. You want your kids to love learning, right? You want them to take school seriously and to learn. Whatever have they seen you learning? Or would they define adulthood as a person who does not have to go to school anymore?
You know what? I think the framing I have often for my son is that I think it helps me a lot is when he watches me, is he thinking adulthood is awesome?
Yeah.
Parenting is great. Being in a relationship is the thing. Is he like, yeah, like I'm looking forward to that phase too?
Sure.
Or is he going, forget it, I'm not doing it that way?
Yeah.
Right? Like,
probably both.
Yeah.
But it's like, are they seeing you do the things that you want them to do? And wisdom is a great, like, what are they seeing you struggle with? What are they seeing you trying to learn? Who are they seeing you being taught by? How is curiosity and learning and a lifelong commitment to those things something you actively model? Which again goes to the point of wisdom is a verb and not a noun.
Yeah, it's very cool. What when we think about AI, kind of a new thing that humans are trying to sort out, and it's the timing of wisdom meets AI is awesome. And how, meaning the launching of your book,
Yeah.
with kind of the beginnings of the throes of AI. Who knows what it's going to look like in 5 years? How are you thinking about AI?
I can't imagine a technology that would require more wisdom than this, right? I think people think it's this replacement. It's the sum total of human knowledge. It can solve these complex problems. It can answer anything, sort of. But without a broad liberal arts education or a sense of how things work, what bullshit is or isn't, what separates a good answer from a bad answer, what matters, what doesn't matter, this thing's going to eat you alive, man.
I'm terrified. Like, I know a few things about psychology.
Yeah.
And so I'm playing with it and I'm asking questions and I'm like, well, that's wrong. Or that's
Confidently wrong.
like, yeah, confidently wrong. Or, wow, that's really incomplete.
Yes.
So my guidance to folks is like, do not give too much credence to
Yes.
what is coming back, because from somebody who spent their whole professional life understanding the science and the applied science of psychology, it's not good.
No, look, it is a commercial product. So it wants to make you happy in the way that it wants, but it is not going to say, I don't know. That's beyond my capacities. I'm bad at that. It might say, oh, I can't do this thing because I'm limited by copyright. But it's never going to say, that's a complex thing that a computer is bad at being able to give a good answer to, and therefore I'm not going to try. Or therefore any attempt to answer would cause more confusion than it would reduce, blah, blah, blah. And so the number of times I get confidently incorrect answers or just laughably bad answers. But again, how do I know that? It's because I know how this question that I'm answering, I might not know the answer to the question that I'm asking, but I know how the answer should be found, or I know the ballpark in which it should exist.
Yeah.
And that is the result of my experience and understanding and insights. Like AI can help you find a quote, but if you don't know what the quote is that you are looking for, or what it's about, or what it's supposed to be expressing, you might as well just be spinning a roulette wheel. Like you have to have this, I can have it help me break down something or locate something or add a little color to something, but it really can't do the main work of thinking, of being a person. In fact, that's a more important skill than ever.
Yeah, and I'm not anti-AI. I think that there's a great utility in it. We have to figure out what it is and how to use it.
Yes.
And until then, the Dunning-Kruger effect is actually running the show.
Well, I've spent a lot of time with my kids, like sort of teaching them how to use it, because
How old are your kids?
9 and 6.
Okay, cool.
So let's come. You want to color? Let's have it create something cool to color. Or you want to know more about something like this? Well, let's ask it this question. My son's obsessed with the Odyssey, and so he asked me this question that I didn't know the answer to. So I was like, well, let's ask ChatGPT, and it's answering, and then we're discussing whether that's right or not, or whether we agree with that answer or not. But like what they call prompt engineering, it requires no small amount of intelligence and wisdom. Like a good question versus a bad question determines whether you'll get a good answer or a bad answer. And understanding how to do that is going to be a skill. So I see it as a tool like any other. And if you're instinctively rejecting a tool, that's anti-wisdom. And if you think the tool can replace having to do the thing, also anti-wisdom.
Yeah, it's cool.
Right? Like you need tools can make you better at what you do, but you have to understand how to use the tool.
There's 5 sources of power in the Buddhist approach. One of them, discernment.
Yes.
And, it feels like a superpower to have the kind of wherewithal to discern. Does this make sense? Does it not make sense?
Yes.
And the only way to really have discernment is to have lots of reference points.
Yes.
And to have some sort of internal reference point as well. Does this seem right to all of these interesting life experiences, external reference points that I've had? And it's AI, one of the things it's robbing is some discernment. So I'm saying we need to flex, and I think you would too, we need to flex even more into the building of discernment.
You need to have the discernment to be able to effectively use the tool and also to effectively protect yourself against the tool.
Yeah.
We're going to enter a world of AI slop, just endless amounts of nonsense and equivocation and personalized sort of information designed to make you think this or that. And if you don't have the ability to know like a good argument from a bad argument, I think you're going to get into it. And look, people were already, we wouldn't be in the mess we're in currently, politically, socially, run down the list of all the ways society is struggling if people were really good at that. Like people are really bad at knowing the difference between The Onion and a real news website, to say nothing of a bad faith news website and a journalistic outlet. I mean, look, something like 15 or 20% of the American population thinks that chocolate milk comes from brown cows.
Not true.
Yes, that is a rough starting point.
Oh my God.
To then deal with technology that wants to tell you what you want to hear, or that requires discernment and intelligence to be able to tap into the considerable knowledge that it, if you think chocolate milk comes from from brown cows, you're gonna have trouble turning on your computer, and then you're also gonna have trouble, making sense of what it's telling you.
So on the kind of combination of a couple virtues, certainly courage and wisdom, how are you navigating the political your ideas on the political spectrum? Because if you say something,
sure,
you're on the cancel culture from 50%, and you say something else, you're on the cancel culture for the other 50%. I'm being provocative here for a little bit, but like, how are you navigating the political world when
I feel like the job of each of us is to call a spade and to say what is obvious. Like I say this in the afterword of the book, like I'm not saying I'm the wisest person in the world, but I'm proud of the fact that I haven't fallen for the biggest con of our time. I don't think, it's obvious to me that Donald Trump is what Donald Trump is. And he is your classic demagogue, con man, sales artist, con artist, salesman. And that isn't to say that some of the things, this is what con men do. Like sometimes what they're selling is good. Sometimes it's not good. Sometimes it's a mix of all of those things, right? So like what a demagogue does is speak to real grievances. They just sell unworkable, manipulative solutions to those grievances. And so, I like sometimes your first reaction to things is about as spot on as they get. And when the host of The Apprentice runs for president of the United States, a person who has literally never read a book, like once try to find an example of a book that Donald Trump has read. Like the only book he has ever spoken about having read was a book. There was a profile of him in the early 80s where he has like a book of Hitler's speeches on his nightstand.
Oh, my
so
goodness.
Like I think there's a dark story that like some smart people I know have managed to fool themselves about. And then some not so smart people have found themselves, manipulated by, which is a story as old as time. So like, I don't dance around it. I don't know exactly where we are on the timeline, but it's not a good timeline. And it's, I think it's imperative on each of us to say that, and to not sort of hedge our bets. Do I make everything that I do about this? No. But like, if you were to describe this to someone and remove the identifying features, they'd be like if you were saying this is happening in another country, or you're just to describe the sort of characteristics of that person, they'd be like that. I think about, there's a story about Kennedy. So again, this is not a partisan thing. There's a story about Kennedy. Kennedy's on all these crazy medications when he's president because he has Addison's disease. And then back in the 60s, they'd just be like, here's an upper, here's a downer. He was on these like crazy drugs. And a doctor one of his doctors finds out all the things he's taking. He's on this antipsychotic, I think, at one point. And he goes, no person with their finger on the button should be taking anything like that. And so you go, what characteristics, what background, what kind of temperament do you want in the person who controls the largest nuclear arsenal in the world, who holds in their hands not just the life and death of billions of people, but also the potential flourishing or suffering of billions of people? You would want the opposite of what we're currently having. And I don't think that's a political argument. I think this is an argument about just sort of what it requires to do the thing.
When you look at the virtues that you've studied and written about,
yeah,
do you think he has? What is your assessment of?
I mean,
those
look,
virtues?
you get nearly assassinated, and you get up and you say, "Fight, fight, fight." Is there a modicum of courage in that, or even a lot of courage in that? Sure, but the virtues can't be separated from each other. And so to just be physically brave in one instance, after, by the way, essentially a lifetime of no such courage, I'm not that impressed. You know what I mean? Like that. It's not that.
Yeah.
Let's just say it doesn't substantially change the equation, and you have to ask yourself, what role do you want to play in that? So some people, and I know some of them personally, and know some of them personally quite well. People have said, well, I think I can get something out of this, or I think this will be good for me in this one targeted area, or, hey, I've always really, really wanted to be the director of the CIA, so I'm not going to lift, this is what I got to do to be the director of the CIA. And that's just a random example I picked. I don't actually know the director of the CIA.
Yeah.
But I mean, I know people in equivalent positions.
Yeah.
And I know what they actually think. And so I know the trade-off that they made to get the thing they say they wanted.
I've got lots of folks that have said to me, I kind of thought I knew what I was voting for.
Yeah.
But I didn't think it was going to be like this.
Which is hilarious because he said it would be like this. And so this goes to our point even about ChatGPT is like, if you lack the ability to hear what is being said explicitly or implicitly, you're going to have a rough go of life. And so, our endless capacity for self-deception is one of the most incredible and terrifying things about the human condition, right? Like, I'm saying the words out loud, but you're not hearing the words because you want to hear X, Y, or Z. Or I think about all the ways that we make ourselves stupid. And I mean that like when you have a grievance or you have a resentment or you have a singular thing you're focused on, it can be very hard for you not to see the other things pertaining to that. And that's kind of what's happening or what has happened, you know? And so, look, none of this is particularly new. And there is an analog figure in almost every era of history. Collectively, I think the wisdom of the founders designed a number of checks and balances that were designed to prevent a thing like this from happening. But it failed in this instance. And it didn't fail, but we failed it. And now here we are. And where is it going to go? I don't know. But I'll say it certainly tests my stoicism to like navigate that day to day. And I think the good news is the Stoics were tested in that way too. I mean, Seneca lives in the time of Nero. Cato saw the rise of Caesar.
Yeah.
You know, like as I said, the Athens of Socrates was not a wonderful place, or he would have lived a little bit longer.
Yeah, and when you think about the clarity in which you're sharing your ideas, you are not concerned about alienating people that would see it differently.
I would prefer that it didn't, you know, and I do understand that it could, but I think like, what is the job? What is my job? Like my job is to say what I think.
Yeah, that's right.
And my job is not to preserve my audience for the sake of having an audience. And this obviously gets into some of the ideas in the Courage book, but like when you live in a world where everyone is preserving their options for a future date, you have what's called a collective action problem. And we are in the midst of a large collective action failure, which is at every point we could have done something about this and we didn't. And in fact, we plunged deeper and deeper into it, and it's going to cause and has caused untold suffering. There's a reason we had like the highest death rate of any of the developed countries in a pandemic. It wasn't preventable, but it could have gone differently. You know, there'll be other things like that, and there have been other things like that. And like I'll be pretty fine. You'll be pretty fine, probably. I mean, we could all die in a horrendous, nuclear incident, but like chances are, that poem about like first they came for, like we're pretty high on the list, like or low on the list depending on which order you're coming from. But like for the most part, it's not people like you and me that are the most susceptible to the kind of agenda that's on the table.
Yeah, I mean the most vulnerable are probably the next generation. As of today's recording, our coral reef is now hit the tipping point.
Yeah.
As of today, meaning that we're on the downhill slope of one of Mother Nature's great checks and balances. And so,
no, I mean just the nature of like worrying about climate change is almost a quaint concern when you have 5 alarm fires happening right in front of you. That says something about the pretty dramatic shift that we've had. But anyways, I guess like I feel like my job is to say what I think is obviously true. And there's a line Stefan Zweig had about the thinker Montaigne, who's a character in the Wisdom book, and he said, like Montaigne shows us that our key job is to remain human in inhuman times. Like I think like to not become an asshole, to not be degraded by or part of the sort of mob or the viciousness or the cruelty. That is like the primary struggle. Because if you lose that, then you lose most of the other things.
Was it Montaigne in your book that I think it was him, but it might have been somebody else, that you illustrated this story about his dad being a great teacher? Yeah. Meaning like there was, I don't know, let's go learn this together. Yeah. Right? Was it his dad?
Yeah, he had this incredible, like very special education. But like, he lived in the time of the religious wars of the 15th and 16th century. And it was a horrible, violent, like awful place. And like the struggle was to not be part of that. Like the first thing is just not like when the mob is stoning someone, to just not pick up the stone. And then obviously the next part is like, how do you save that person, or how do you participate in creating a society that doesn't do stuff like that anymore? But like, if just everyone individually didn't pick up their stone, that also solves the problem. And so like, it starts there. And so like, virtue is, especially justice. Like, justice isn't this thing that you get. It's a thing that you give. It's a thing that you live by. And it's taking like, most of us are not president, most of us are not senators, most of us are not, but like, each of us does have a certain amount of discretion or influence, or some individual decision has come down to you. And how are you going to act? How are you going to act? What are you going to do?
Ryan, this is awesome. Thank you for a discourse that is serious, it's complicated, it's thoughtful, and you navigate the nuances really well. So thank you for that. And I have one just question. I said I'd come back to it, but you had a talk at a Naval Academy that was, I think, canceled.
So I had been doing a series on the cardinal virtues to each incoming class at the Naval Academy, which has been, by the way, one of the honors of my life. These are like, if there's anything that gives me hope, it's you meet that class and you're like, none of these kids have to be here. Like, these are the best and brightest young men and women from all over the country.
Getting in is really hard to do.
It's extraordinarily hard, but because it's so hard, they could also be at Harvard or Yale and looking at, an unlimited Wall Street, career afterwards. And they chose to be here. And by the way, this is only the beginning of a multi-year commitment that they have to make. And so I've been doing this series on the cardinal virtues. So I did courage, I did discipline, I did justice last year. Mostly I talked about Jimmy Carter, who was one of the most famous graduates in the Naval Academy. And so this year I was going to talk about Admiral James Stockdale, who was also in Carter's class, as an example of wisdom. And one of the stories I've been planning to tell was about Stockdale's time at Stanford, which he went to in the middle of his career. He's a great fighter pilot, and the Navy sends him to get a master's degree. And he takes a course on Marxist thought, comparative Marxist thought, where they only read
Karl Marx.
They read the Marxists, not like thinkers about Marxism, but Lenin and Marx, and in the original. And so he is like, in the early days of the Cold War, or the middle of the Cold War, he is being taught like the most controversial, dangerous ideas of the literal enemy in this college environment. So you might go, what does a fighter pilot possibly need to learn this stuff from? Well, when he gets shot down over Hanoi, and he gets, or over North Vietnam, and gets sent to what's called the Hanoi Hilton, one of the worst prison camps in maybe the 20th century. We're talking like Auschwitz bad level of torture, and just one of the worst things that humans have subjected other humans to. And there, in a North Vietnamese Marxist prison camp, suddenly the ideas that he was taught actually operate as a sort of a line of defense, because he's able to debate and argue with his captors about what he's being subjected to. And it's not just a prison camp, but is a re-education camp. But he already knows the stuff. And so this is a famous story, because he talks about how this is why you can't be afraid of ideas and you have to be engaged with them. So anyways, I was planning on talking about this regardless. And then I found out a few weeks before that the Naval Academy, at orders of the President and the Secretary of Defense, had removed about 300 books from the library on campus because they were like too woke or DEI focused or something. It's your classic sort of authoritarian playbook of like, we tell you what you can see, and we're going to make a show of certain ideas being accessible. And so anyways, I was going to talk about that. I own a bookstore, for Christ's sake. I don't think book banning is good. So I was going to mention that. And in fact, actually, the window of my bookstore is a quote from Rage Against the Machine that says, they don't got to burn the books, they just remove them, right? We tend to think of it as like, oh, the bonfire of the vanities. But no, they just make it a little harder to get. So I felt I couldn't not talk about this. And then, they canceled the talk about an hour before I was supposed to go. I flew to Maryland. I was prepped. I was about to walk over there. Hey, the powers that be, we'd love to have you talk, but you got to remove this section. And I said, I can't do that. And they were like, okay, well then you can't step on campus. And I was supposed to talk to the football team later that day. I was supposed to give another lecture later in the year. It wasn't like, we'll kill your family if you do this. But it was the choice between access. Like I could have removed it and no one would know. And I could have continued my access. I could have but that's not what this is about. And certainly not what wisdom is about. And so like, that's what I mean. We all have our individual choices, and then you got to make the right choice, the part of the choice that's up to you when it comes your way.
I love that. I'm so happy that you get to tell that story in a way where, you stood for something.
Well, thank you. I mean, I did try to tell them, like, hey, you understand this will get more attention than if you just let me. 1,000 people will hear me say this. Millions of people will hear me if you don't let me say it. And I think quite reasonably, nobody wants to be the person that ultimately the wrath of the president comes down to. And those people had to choose between, like, this guy's supposed to throw away his pension that he earned for 40 years.
You let Ryan Holiday say what?
Exactly.
You let him challenge the administration on
you
the books?
You let them embarrass the president or the Secretary of Defense on stage in the Naval Academy. I get that. I mean, that's not the choice they should make. It's also not a choice they should have to make. The person I'm most disappointed with is not the president or the Secretary of Defense, but the 3-star admiral who is in charge of the Naval Academy, whose job it is to teach these kids how to make hard, right decisions, who just threw out all credibility when they allowed those books to be removed from that is an order that you say, sure, but it's accompanied by my resignation.
Yeah, right.
Right? And the irony and I think the ultimate lesson in all this is like, do you know what happened to her? They fired her anyway afterwards because she's a female admiral running the Naval Academy, and that was always going to happen. And so often you think and I've made this mistake in my own life, and it's most of the embarrassing moments in my career, the things I wish I could get back, are anytime I made the expedient choice. And I said, well, I'll lose my job if I do this. You shouldn't want to keep a job that you could lose by doing the right thing. That doesn't make the decision easier, and it doesn't make it any more or less fair. But like anytime I've done that, or I've got, well, they're paying me a lot, or like, oh, I don't want to have to tell them that I think what they're doing is bad or whatever. Those are the ones you wish you could get back.
Well done. I called my mentor after I got my first job in pro sport. I was excited, and he says, you sound excited. And I said, yeah. I was trying to play it a little cool because he's been around a long time. He said, call me this excited when you've been fired 3 times because you stood for something.
Yeah, that's great.
It was a great gem that he passed on to me.
No, what a gift that like, hey, your job is to stand for something. Your job is not to keep your job.
That's right. Yeah, stand for something. Very cool, man. Thank you. Brother, I appreciate you. Thank you for adding good to the world.
Thanks for having me.
Yeah. Open invitation, of course, always.
I will take you up on it.
Yeah. Awesome. Thank you so much, Ryan.
Sweet.
Next time on Finding Mastery, we're bringing back The Game Inside the Games, a special series recorded live from Radio Row at the Super Bowl. This series goes beyond the scoreboard to explore the inner game of human performance, how elite performers prepare, how they think, and the psychological skills they rely on when the world is watching. Each day, those lessons are translated from sport into leadership, teamwork, and decision-making far beyond the field. So join us every day across 5 days for The Game Inside the Games, starting Wednesday, February 4th, 9 a.m. Pacific, only on Finding Mastery.